Hello and welcome to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. This is your space to practice English in a natural, relaxed way where stories, examples, and gentle reflections guide you through real-life situations. Together, we're going to explore how English becomes easier when you stop worrying about perfection and start focusing on clarity, connection, and confidence. So many learners feel nervous when they speak English, and that nervousness often comes from overthinking, worrying about mistakes, imagining judgment, or believing every sentence must be flawless. But as you'll hear in the stories we share today, the truth is much simpler. Communication is about sharing ideas. Even short, clear sentences can be powerful. Let's begin with something very common: speaking in daily conversations. Many learners feel nervous when they speak English in front of multiple people. My cousin Anna once joined a community meeting and stayed silent because she felt intimidated. I suggested starting with small comments such as, "I agree with that," or "That is interesting." These small contributions helped her gradually participate more, and with time, she felt more included. Another reason learners often hesitate is the fear of repeating the same words too often. My friend Liam, for example, paused constantly because he didn't want to use simple words multiple times. I reminded him that repetition is normal and that the focus should be on conveying the idea clearly. After practicing with this mindset, he began speaking more freely. Sometimes the challenge is not knowing how to start a conversation naturally. My neighbor Sarah once waited silently at a social event because she wasn't sure how to begin. I suggested small opening phrases like, "How was your weekend?" or "Did you try something new recently?" These simple starters made conversation flow more easily, and Sarah soon felt more relaxed. There are also moments when learners anticipate long and complicated questions. My school friend Henry often paused whenever classmates asked him something, because he expected multiple questions at once. I suggested answering one question at a time and asking for clarification if needed. Breaking it down step by step reduced his stress and allowed him to respond with more confidence. Vocabulary can also become a big barrier when people overthink. My cousin Emily paused frequently, trying to remember the perfect words. I encouraged her to start with simple words and then gradually add more complex vocabulary later. Clarity is always more important than difficulty. Once Emily accepted this, she became much more comfortable in conversations. Tone can also cause nervousness. My friend Nathan once hesitated while speaking to a colleague because he wasn't sure if he sounded too formal or too casual. I suggested starting naturally and adjusting the tone later. That way he could focus on expressing himself first. Speaking naturally often feels more relaxed and confident, and Nathan quickly noticed the difference. New environments can also feel intimidating. My neighbor Jessica froze during her first community class because everything felt unfamiliar. I suggested she practice short sentences with a friend or family member first. That familiar practice gave her confidence, and she soon began speaking more easily in new settings. Another common fear is forgetting the main point of a conversation. My school friend Oliver once started a story about his weekend, but forgot what he wanted to say halfway through. I advised him to break stories into smaller parts and focus on one idea at a time. That made it much easier to continue without stress. Some learners feel nervous because they only speak English when required. My cousin Mia, for example, used English mainly for presentations and exams. Casual conversation felt stressful for her. I suggested she speak for just a few minutes daily at home, sharing thoughts about her routine. That small, regular practice made everyday conversations feel far less intimidating. There's also the fear of criticism. My friend Ethan often paused during group discussions because he expected correction. I explained to him that most people are supportive and focus on ideas rather than mistakes. Thinking positively helped him reduce his anxiety. And then there are emotions. How do you express them in English without feeling strange? My neighbor Chloe hesitated even when she wanted to say she was happy or upset. I suggested practicing simple expressions such as, I am excited, or I feel worried. Being able to express emotions naturally gave her a sense of confidence and helped conversations feel real and connected. For some learners, reading and writing in English feels easier than speaking. My cousin Jack, for example, read books daily but rarely spoke. When asked to share his thoughts aloud, he froze. I suggested he speak aloud for a few minutes each day, even alone, just to train his fluency. This daily habit slowly reduced his hesitation. Another common worry is trying to impress others with advanced vocabulary. My friend Lucy often paused, trying to add big words to every sentence. I reminded her that clarity matters more than showing off vocabulary. Expressing ideas simply first, and then adding extra words naturally, makes communication more effective. Interruptions can also be stressful. My neighbor Daniel once paused mid-conversation because someone asked a question unexpectedly. I suggested he respond calmly and then continue with his thought. Practicing this skill made interruptions less stressful over time. Some learners anticipate long conversations filled with multiple ideas, and this overwhelms them. My school friend Olivia tried to prepare complex sentences in advance, but when the conversation changed, she froze. I suggested focusing on expressing just one idea at a time. This reduced the pressure and kept the flow natural. Even sharing personal experiences can feel intimidating. My cousin Ryan once paused while talking about his weekend trip because he feared making mistakes. I suggested he start with small details such as, I went to the park, or I cooked dinner. Gradually, he expanded into longer stories. With practice, he grew confident telling full experiences. Another fear is silence while thinking. My friend Emily once hesitated for a few seconds and felt embarrassed. I encouraged her to use small phrases like, let me think for a moment, or, that is interesting. These phrases make pauses feel natural and acceptable. Comparison with others can also cause nervousness. My neighbor Liam froze during a class activity because other students spoke faster. I reminded him to focus on his own pace. Fluency improves with consistent practice, not competition. Speaking with people you respect can also feel daunting. My cousin Mia once hesitated while speaking with her teacher. I suggested she imagine it as a casual conversation first. This simple mental shift helped her feel relaxed and speak more naturally. And of course, unfamiliar topics can be overwhelming. My friend Nathan once froze during a discussion on technology because he didn't know much about it. I suggested acknowledging what he did know and then asking questions when unsure. Honest responses keep conversations flowing without pressure. Finally, many learners overthink grammar. My school friend Chloe often paused repeatedly, trying to construct perfect sentences. I suggested she focus on conveying her ideas first and worry about grammar later. Communication always matters more than perfection. Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia. And in this part, we'll move into stories connected to family, friends, and the small daily practices that help build confidence in English. These personal settings are some of the most common places where learners feel both nervous and motivated. Let's begin with family. Sometimes family conversations in English feel harder than formal settings, because you want to express emotions clearly. My cousin Mia once hesitated when trying to tell her brother that she was proud of him. She didn't know the right expression and paused awkwardly. I suggested simple phrases like, "I'm happy for you," or "I'm proud of you." These small, heartfelt sentences made her communication warmer and more confident. I also remember my brother Michael, who needed to make a phone call to schedule an appointment at the local bank. Phone conversations are especially difficult because you cannot rely on body language. Michael was nervous because he imagined the bank officer would speak very quickly. Before calling, he wrote down key points like, "I want to schedule an appointment for a new account," and "What documents are needed?" During the call, he spoke slowly and paused to listen carefully. When the officer asked a question he did not fully understand, he politely said, "Could you repeat that?" The officer repeated the question and Michael answered clearly. After the call, he realized that nervousness often comes from imagining worst-case scenarios. By preparing a few key sentences and asking for clarification when needed, he handled the conversation effectively. Another family story comes from my cousin Emma, who had to explain a health situation at a pharmacy. She was nervous because she had never described symptoms in English before and worried about using the correct medical vocabulary. On entering the pharmacy, she took a deep breath and started with simple sentences. "I have a headache." "I also feel tired." The pharmacist nodded and asked a few questions. Emma replied using simple phrases like, "It started 2 days ago," and "I take medicine sometimes." The pharmacist was patient, and Emma realized that her initial fear was much bigger than the actual situation. Speaking in clear, simple sentences allowed her to get help effectively without advanced vocabulary or perfect grammar. Friends, too, bring important practice opportunities. My friend Daniel once attended a dinner at his neighbor's house where many guests spoke English. He felt anxious because he worried his sentences would be too simple. He decided to start with short comments about the food. The salad is very fresh, or I like the soup. Guests responded politely and the conversation flowed naturally. Daniel gradually shared small stories about his workday and hobbies. By focusing on expressing ideas clearly, rather than impressing anyone, he relaxed and participated without fear. Another friend, Alex, started a habit of speaking English with his wife while cooking. They described what they were doing step by step. Alex would say, "I am chopping onions," or, "Can you pass me the salt?" This casual, low-pressure practice helped him feel more comfortable speaking in other situations. I also recall my school friend Chloe, who joined a hiking trip with friends from an English-speaking community. She worried about explaining her hiking experience. Instead of focusing on perfect grammar, she described the trip in simple sentences. "We started early and the trail was long but beautiful." The friends responded positively, and Chloe realized that sharing ideas clearly is always more important than speaking perfectly. Sometimes, neighbors become part of these language journeys too. My neighbor Thomas once experienced nervousness while ordering food in a cafe for the first time in English. He practiced saying his order at home. "I would like a coffee and a sandwich, please." When the time came, he spoke slowly, and the server understood him clearly. That experience gave Thomas confidence to handle more daily conversations. Simple habits also make a big difference. My friend Sophie once had to ask a delivery person about a package. She worried she might not explain clearly, but she started with short sentences. "Hello, I'm expecting a package. Is it here?" The delivery person responded kindly, and Sophie followed with, "Thank you. Can I sign here?" The interaction went smoothly, and she felt proud of herself. All of these small, personal examples show us that family and friends create safe environments for practice. By using short, clear sentences every day, learners begin to feel more confident when situations become more formal or professional. And speaking of professional, that's where we'll go next. In the upcoming section, I'll share stories about learners handling English in offices, schools, meetings, and other formal situations, always with the same lesson. Clarity matters more than perfection. Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and in this part, we're going to step into professional and study environments. For many learners, these situations feel more intimidating than casual conversations. But as the stories you'll hear show, the same principles apply. Simple, clear communication is more effective than aiming for perfection. Let's begin with presentations and meetings. My cousin Ryan once had to present a short report in English at his office. He was nervous because he imagined that everyone would notice every single mistake. Before the meeting, he practiced his key points in short sentences. During the presentation, he spoke slowly, paused when needed, and focused on main ideas rather than trying to cover everything in flawless detail. His colleagues were understanding. Ryan realized that clarity and confidence mattered much more than perfect English. Something similar happened to my neighbor Laura, who wanted to join a local book club that discussed English novels. She hesitated because she thought she had to speak in long, perfect sentences to participate. At her first meeting, she started with short comments. I liked the main character, and the ending surprised me. Other members asked small follow-up questions, and Laura replied using the same short sentences. By the end of the meeting, she felt comfortable sharing her opinions. She realized that even simple contributions are valued. Professional settings also include school events. Laura again had to attend a parent-teacher meeting at her child's school. She usually spoke English at home with friends, but this formal environment made her anxious. She practiced simple introductions and short comments before the meeting. When the teacher asked about her child's homework routine, Laura paused for a few seconds, then said, "My child does homework after school. We review it together." The teacher smiled, and Laura's anxiety eased. As the conversation continued, Laura asked questions using simple phrases like, "Can you explain this task?" and "Is my child improving in this area?" Each successful exchange built her confidence. Another friend, Mark, attended a community English conversation group. He worried about his strong accent and about pronunciation mistakes. On the first day, he introduced himself and told a short story about his weekend. He paused often and spoke slowly, but the group leader, Sarah, encouraged him gently with follow-up questions. "What did you do first?" And "Who were you with?" Mark realized that he didn't need to tell his story perfectly. He could share it piece by piece. By the end of the session, he felt much more confident. This experience showed him that conversations are about connecting, not perfection. Workshops and group tasks bring their own challenges. My friend Nathan decided to volunteer at a local community center, guiding children in arts and crafts workshops. He felt anxious because he had never spoken to children in English before and feared they wouldn't understand him. The night before his first day, Nathan practiced in front of the mirror. "Please take a piece of paper," and "Can you color this shape?" He even imagined possible questions like, "Can I use blue?" On the first day, Nathan's heart was racing. At first, he watched how another volunteer interacted with the kids. He noticed that simple sentences, smiles, and repetition were enough. When his turn came, he began with a small greeting. "Hello, welcome to the Arts and Crafts Workshop." Some children responded shyly, and Nathan relaxed. He continued, "We are going to make paper flowers. Take a piece of colored paper." When a child asked, "Can I use pink?" Nathan replied confidently, "Yes, you can use any color you like." Step by step, he gained confidence. Even when he didn't understand a question, he remembered to say politely, "Can you say that again, please?" By the end of the session, Nathan felt accomplished. Everyone understood him, and he realized that communication not flawless grammar, was what mattered. Over the next weeks, Nathan became more comfortable. He began adding longer instructions like, fold the paper in half before cutting, or be careful with the scissors. When children asked questions he hadn't prepared for, such as, can we make a butterfly instead of a flower? He learned to respond simply, yes, that is fine. You can choose what you like. His confidence grew through practice. Even outside the workshops, Nathan practiced English with other volunteers and parents, asking about hobbies, weekends, or favorite crafts. He realized that honesty also helped. When he didn't know much about a topic, he could say, I'm not very familiar with that, but I'd like to learn. Conversations flowed naturally without pressure. At one point, Nathan had to explain a more complex craft to a large group. The task was to fold multiple layers of paper into a 3D shape. He felt nervous, but he wrote down key phrases. Fold carefully, line up the edges, glue the layers together. When some children looked confused, Nathan combined demonstrations with short instructions. This combination worked perfectly. He discovered that nervousness often comes from imagining failure, but in practice, clear steps and calm delivery made everything easier. Nathan's journey continued. He began to joke about his mistakes, making others laugh and making himself feel more relaxed. One day, he even helped a child who didn't speak any English at all. He used gestures and very simple sentences like, this is red, and cut here. With patience, the child followed along successfully. A parent later complimented Nathan, saying, you explain everything so clearly. My child understands every step. That compliment boosted Nathan's confidence, and he realized it was not perfect grammar that mattered, but clear, patient communication. Professional and study environments test our skills, but they also provide some of the best opportunities to grow. From office meetings to workshops, book clubs, and community groups, each experience shows us the same lesson. Confidence comes step by step, and clarity matters more than perfection. In the next section, we'll look at another important area: health, emotions, and personal challenges, where nervousness often appears most strongly. Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and in this part, we'll talk about situations that feel personal and sometimes even stressful, like explaining health concerns, managing emotions, or handling unexpected challenges in daily life. These moments often make learners feel nervous because the stakes feel higher. But as the stories will show, simple and clear communication is always enough. Let's begin with health. My cousin Emma once had to explain a health problem at a pharmacy. She had never described symptoms in English before, and she was worried about using the right medical vocabulary. When she walked into the pharmacy, she took a deep breath and began with short, simple sentences. I have a headache. I also feel tired. The pharmacist nodded and asked questions. Emma replied with phrases like, it started 2 days ago, and I take medicine sometimes. To her surprise, the pharmacist understood her perfectly. She realized that her fear had been much bigger than the actual situation. Even without advanced medical vocabulary, she got the help she needed by keeping her sentences short and clear. A similar situation happened with my friend Sophie, though in daily life. She needed to ask a delivery person about a package. Sophie worried she wouldn't explain clearly, but she started with a simple line. "Hello, I'm expecting a package. Is it here?" The delivery person responded kindly, and Sophie followed with, "Thank you. Can I sign here?" The conversation went smoothly, and Sophie felt proud of managing it. Sometimes even the smallest success makes a big difference in building confidence. Now let's move to emotions, because nervousness isn't only about grammar or vocabulary. Often it's about feelings. Many learners feel anxious when they compare themselves to fluent speakers. My friend Daniel once froze in class because he thought his English wasn't as good as others. I reminded him to focus on his own progress, not comparison. Gradual improvement builds real confidence. My cousin Mia also struggled with emotions when she forgot phrases in mid-conversation. She would pause nervously, worried people would judge her. I encouraged her to practice simple, common phrases daily, so they became automatic. Familiarity makes speaking much easier. Silence can also cause nervousness. My neighbor Thomas thought pauses looked awkward. I explained to him that pauses are natural. They help organize thoughts, and even native speakers pause often. Short silences are part of normal communication. Another challenge is the fear of sounding awkward. My friend Nathan, who often shared stories, paused frequently because he worried about how he sounded. I told him to focus on sharing ideas naturally. Listeners care more about clarity and effort than about whether every word is perfect. Sometimes emotions intensify in formal or unexpected situations. My friend Alex, for example, had to renew his driver's license at the town hall. He had never spoken English in an official environment before, and he felt anxious just thinking about it. On the morning of his visit, he practiced sentences in the mirror like, "Good morning, I am here to renew my driver's license." When he arrived, his heart was racing. At first, he froze. But after greeting the clerk and using simple sentences, the process went smoothly. Even when his mind went blank, he remembered one prepared phrase. "I recently moved, so I updated my address." The clerk understood, and Alex realized that simple, clear sentences were enough. He didn't need perfect grammar. The same lesson came to my neighbor Laura in a book club. She worried she would sound awkward, but she started with short comments like, "I liked the main character," or "the ending surprised me." Others responded positively, and Laura saw that even small contributions mattered. Sometimes emotions build around pronunciation. My school friend Chloe worried about saying every word correctly. I suggested she focus on ideas instead. Over time, her pronunciation improved naturally without extra stress. And sometimes nervousness comes from imagining judgment. My cousin Olivia often froze during group discussions because she thought everyone noticed her mistakes. I reminded her that most listeners are focused on the message, not on grammar. Thinking about contribution instead of judgment reduced her anxiety. One of the most inspiring emotional journeys was Nathan's volunteering at the community center, which we talked about earlier. His nervousness turned into confidence because he focused on clarity, patience, and connection. By the end, he was even joking with others about his mistakes. That emotional shift is just as important as practicing vocabulary or grammar. Another deeply personal example is from my cousin Lily. She once froze when trying to explain how she organized her weekend. She imagined too many possible questions and became overwhelmed. I suggested focusing on telling the story step by step, instead of imagining every reaction. Over time, she learned to speak smoothly without freezing. And let's not forget confidence in social events. My friend Daniel once attended a dinner at his neighbor's house where many guests spoke English. He felt anxious, worrying that his sentences would be too simple. But he started small, with comments like, "The salad is very fresh," or "I like the soup." Guests responded warmly, and Daniel gradually shared small stories. By the end of the evening, he participated comfortably. These personal and emotional challenges show us that nervousness is often not about language at all, but about our own expectations. Whether it's health, formal settings, or daily social interactions, clarity and patience always win. In the next part, we'll move into another key area, daily life and everyday practice, where small, consistent habits turn nervousness into confidence. Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and in this part, we're going to explore how daily habits and simple routines can make English practice natural and stress-free. Nervousness often disappears when learners build small, regular habits instead of waiting for big or formal situations. Let's begin with the importance of practice in everyday life. My friend Daniel, for example, had only studied English in classrooms. When he tried ordering food in English for the first time, he paused repeatedly and felt uncomfortable. I suggested he practice small daily tasks in English, like asking for directions or buying groceries. With each small step, he built confidence in real-world situations. My neighbor Thomas had a similar issue. He believed speaking required long sentences, so he hesitated and froze. I reminded him that short sentences are absolutely fine. For example, "I want a ticket," or "I like this food." These simple beginnings allowed his ideas to flow naturally. Another story comes from my cousin Olivia. She often felt nervous in class discussions, freezing when asked questions. I encouraged her to start speaking casually at home or with family members. When speaking happens in familiar, low-pressure settings, confidence builds step by step. One of my favorite examples is my friend Alex. He and his wife created a habit of speaking English while cooking. They described what they were doing. "I am chopping onions," or "Can you pass me the salt?" This playful routine made English practice enjoyable and natural, helping Alex feel more comfortable in other situations. Daily life can also include playful challenges. My neighbor James practiced with his sister by describing objects around the house. "The lamp is yellow," or "the chair is blue." This simple game reduced stress and made English practice a fun part of daily routines. Consistency also helps with thinking in English. My neighbor Ryan always translated from his native language, which slowed him down. I suggested he think in English for small daily thoughts, like describing the weather or what he ate. Gradually, he stopped translating and started speaking more naturally. Even hobbies can turn into practice opportunities. My school friend Chloe once joined a hiking trip with English-speaking friends. She worried about explaining her experience, but she kept her sentences simple. We started early. The trail was long, but beautiful. Her friends understood and responded warmly, and Chloe realized she could share experiences without needing complex grammar. Similarly, Laura wanted to join a local book club but hesitated because she thought long, perfect sentences were required. She started small with comments like, "I liked the main character," or "The ending surprised me." By the end of the meeting, she felt much more comfortable contributing. Let's move to social routines, because daily conversations with neighbors, colleagues, or shopkeepers are excellent practice. My neighbor Thomas once felt nervous about ordering food in a cafe. He practiced at home. "I would like a coffee and a sandwich, please." When the moment came, he spoke slowly, and the server understood him clearly. That one successful order gave him confidence for many future conversations. My brother Michael faced a similar challenge when he had to call the bank. Phone conversations can feel especially hard because there's no body language. Before the call, Michael wrote down his key sentences. "I want to schedule an appointment for a new account," and "What documents are needed?" During the call, he listened carefully, and when he didn't understand, he said politely, "Could you repeat that?" The officer repeated, and Michael answered clearly. Afterward, he realized his nervousness had come more from imagining worst-case scenarios than from the actual conversation. Another example comes from Nathan. He kept a journal in English, writing short daily stories about his life. After writing about his morning walk, for example, he could share it later in conversation. "I walked to the park. I saw a dog. It was very playful." Writing helped him organize his thoughts, which made speaking easier. Even shopping can be practice. Nathan used to say only 1 or 2 words like coffee sandwich. But later he started forming full sentences. "I would like a large coffee and a sandwich, please." Shop staff responded politely, and each successful exchange reduced his nervousness. Community life already offers practice. Nathan once attended a local meeting about a park renovation. At first, he wanted to stay quiet, but then he started with a simple idea. "I think adding benches will help people relax." Encouraged by nods, he added, "We could also plant more flowers near the playground." By focusing on step-by-step expression, he contributed effectively and gained confidence. Daily practice doesn't always mean speaking for long periods. Sometimes it's about short, regular exposure. My school friend Chloe, for example, read and listened to English every day but rarely spoke. Once she began speaking a little each day, even in short sentences, her fluency improved dramatically. I also remember Nathan's trip to the train station. He practiced his sentences quietly in line. "One ticket to Mapletown, please. What time is the next train?" When it was his turn, he spoke clearly and the clerk understood. Even when asked about a return ticket, Nathan replied simply, "I will buy the return ticket later." He realized that small, clear sentences were enough for real-life situations. And sometimes practice can be fun and spontaneous. Nathan and his sister Emma once played a game describing things in their room. "The lamp is yellow. The chair is blue." It was lighthearted, but it built confidence for more complex conversations later. Everyday life is full of opportunities like these. Whether cooking, shopping, attending a meeting, or chatting with family, each small step adds up. Daily practice not only reduces nervousness, but also builds lasting fluency. In the next part, we'll move into another important theme: work and professional settings, where English skills meet formal expectations and higher pressure. Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and in this part, we'll step into the world of work and professional situations, where speaking English can sometimes feel like the highest test of confidence. Many learners feel nervous in offices, meetings, or presentations, but the truth is, simple clarity and calm expression often matter more than flawless grammar. Let's begin with Ryan. My cousin Ryan once had to give a short presentation in English at his office. He was nervous because he imagined that his colleagues would notice every single mistake. Before the meeting, Ryan practiced his key points in short sentences. When the time came, he spoke slowly, paused when needed, and focused on his main ideas instead of chasing perfection. To his surprise, his colleagues were understanding, and Ryan realized that clarity and confidence mattered far more than flawless English. Another workplace example comes from my friend Michael, who felt tense speaking with his manager. The thought of talking to someone he respected made him freeze. I suggested that he first imagine the conversation as casual, almost like talking with a friend. This shift in mindset helped him feel more comfortable, and in time, his confidence grew. My friend Nathan also faced many challenges in professional environments. One summer, he volunteered at a community center where he guided children in arts and crafts workshops. On his first day, he felt extremely anxious. He had never given instructions to children in English before, and he worried they would not understand him. Nathan practiced in front of a mirror the night before, repeating sentences like, "Please take a piece of paper," and "Can you color this shape?" When the day arrived, Nathan felt his heart racing, but he started with a small greeting. "Hello, welcome to the Arts and Crafts Workshop." That one simple sentence eased his nerves. As the session continued, children asked questions like, "Can I use pink?" Nathan replied, "Yes, you can use any color you like." With each response, his confidence grew. He realized that he didn't need perfect English. He just needed to be clear and patient. Over the next weeks, Nathan added more detail to his sentences, such as fold the paper in half before cutting and be careful with the scissors. Sometimes children asked unexpected questions like, "Can we make a butterfly instead of a flower?" At first, he hesitated. Then he remembered to respond simply, "Yes, that is fine. You can choose what you like." Nathan also learned to ask for clarification when needed. When he didn't understand a child's question, he calmly said, "Can you say that again, please?" The child repeated, and the conversation continued smoothly. By combining short instructions with patience and kindness, Nathan grew more confident every day. Later, he even had to explain a complicated activity involving multiple steps, folding layers of colored paper into a three-dimensional shape. Nathan felt nervous because of the complexity, so he prepared phrases like, "Fold carefully," "Line up the edges," and "Glue the layers together." He demonstrated each step slowly, repeating the words as he acted. The children understood perfectly, and Nathan realized that communication is not about flawless grammar, but about clarity and calm delivery. The professional world can also include formal group discussions. My friend Michael once froze in a meeting because he imagined everyone was judging his mistakes. I suggested he focus on contributing ideas, not on the fear of judgment. Once he shifted his mindset to sharing, his confidence grew. Community meetings also provided practice. Nathan once attended a discussion about a park renovation. At first, he planned to stay silent, but then he spoke up. "I think adding benches will help people relax." Encouraged by nods, he added, "We could also plant more flowers near the playground." Speaking step by step allowed him to contribute effectively. Another example is Laura, who attended a parent-teacher meeting at her child's school. She worried that teachers would judge her English. Before the meeting, she practiced introducing herself and rehearsed simple sentences. When asked about her child's homework routine, she froze for a moment, then replied with short, clear sentences. "My child does homework after school. We review it together." The teacher responded positively, and Laura realized that polite, simple English was enough. Emma, my cousin, faced a similar challenge in a pharmacy. She had to explain her health symptoms in English for the first time. She felt nervous about not knowing medical vocabulary. At the counter, she started simply, "I have a headache. I also feel tired." The pharmacist nodded and asked questions. Emma replied, "It started 2 days ago, and I take medicine sometimes." She discovered that simple clarity was more than enough to get help. Mark, a friend who joined an English conversation group, also struggled at first. He felt self-conscious about his strong accent. During his first meeting, he paused often and spoke slowly. The group leader, Sarah, encouraged him gently with small follow-up questions. "What did you do first?" And "Who are you with?" Mark realized he didn't need to tell the whole story perfectly. He could share it one step at a time. By the end of the session, he felt far more confident. Even small professional interactions can feel intimidating, like phone calls. My brother Michael needed to call the bank to schedule an appointment. Before calling, he wrote down key points. I want to schedule an appointment for a new account. And what documents are needed? When he didn't understand the officer's question, he politely asked, "Could you repeat that?" By staying calm, he handled the call smoothly. Ryan's office presentations, Laura's meetings, Emma's pharmacy visit, Nathan's volunteer work. All these stories show the same truth. In professional and formal situations, confidence grows not from perfection, but from clarity, preparation, and steady practice. In the next part of English Without Limit, we'll step into another deeply important theme: study and learning environments, where classrooms, exams, and academic expectations often make English feel more intimidating. Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and in this part, we'll explore the classroom, exams, and study situations where English can sometimes feel like a test of not only knowledge, but also confidence. For many learners, the pressure of being evaluated makes speaking much harder. But with small steps and simple strategies, study environments can also become safe spaces to grow. Let's begin with my school friend Chloe. She often froze when answering questions in class. She thought that every response had to be long and complete. Once, during a discussion, she tried to build a long sentence but forgot midway and stopped speaking. I suggested she start with short, clear answers. Gradually, as her comfort grew, she could expand those sentences naturally. That shift helped her realize that speaking doesn't always mean producing complicated language at once. It's about building clarity step by step. Another student example comes from my cousin Olivia. She once froze during a class discussion when several classmates asked her questions at once. She panicked, unable to respond. I suggested she try answering just one question at a time. Breaking the interaction into smaller steps made the conversation manageable. Later, Olivia told me that she felt calmer whenever she reminded herself she didn't have to handle everything at once. Exams bring a special kind of stress. My friend Chloe often spoke English well in casual settings, but when exams arrived, she froze. The silence of the exam room, the ticking clock, and the thought of being graded overwhelmed her. I suggested she practice casual conversations daily at home, with no pressure of evaluation. The familiarity of speaking in safe settings helped her carry some calmness into exams. Daniel, my friend, also experienced this tension. He felt behind when others in class spoke faster. Comparing himself to classmates made him feel smaller. I reminded him that fluency isn't about speed. Speaking clearly, at his own pace, mattered more. Slowly, Daniel embraced that idea and focused on personal progress. Gradual improvement, not competition, builds confidence. Another class-related fear is not understanding idiomatic expressions. My friend Megan once heard a phrase during class that she didn't understand. She immediately went quiet, feeling embarrassed. I suggested she simply ask, "Can you explain what that means?" The teacher and classmates gladly explained, and Megan realized that asking questions is not a weakness, but a strength. Sometimes nervousness in study settings comes from trying to memorize entire sentences. My friend Daniel once prepared for class discussions by memorizing exact lines. But when he forgot mid-sentence, he froze. I encouraged him to practice ideas instead of exact sentences. That way, he could adjust his words while keeping his meaning clear. With time, his flexibility made him far more confident. Olivia also struggled with imagined judgment. In group discussions, she often thought that every mistake was noticed by her classmates. I explained that most listeners focus on ideas, not on perfection. When Olivia shifted her focus toward sharing rather than performing, her stress eased. One of the most common challenges in classrooms is joining group discussions. Emma, my cousin, once stayed silent during group work because she didn't know how to enter the conversation. I suggested she start with very small contributions, one short comment, or even a simple agreement. Over time, her contributions grew longer. That step-by-step growth built her comfort. Politeness in study environments also matters. My neighbor Thomas once struggled to ask for clarification in class. He paused awkwardly when he didn't understand. I suggested phrases like, "Could you explain that?" Or, "I am not sure I understand." These polite requests not only helped him learn, but also kept the classroom conversation smooth. Another common issue is fear of sounding boring in classroom discussions. Chloe once thought that her simple sentences weren't enough to hold attention. I reassured her that natural conversations are valuable even if they seem plain. Sharing daily experiences or small opinions often connects better than trying to impress. Sometimes nervousness also comes from silence. In study groups, Chloe once worried that pauses meant failure. I explained that short silences are part of natural conversations. They give time to think and organize thoughts. Once she accepted pauses as normal, she felt more relaxed. In another example, Daniel once forgot a word during a group activity. Instead of stopping, he paraphrased with simpler language. The group understood him perfectly, and Daniel realized that conversations don't collapse if one word is missing. Even small classroom experiences matter. Megan once joined a literature discussion and felt lost when the teacher asked her opinion about a story. She answered simply, "I liked the character." That small contribution opened space for more. She later added, "The ending surprised me." With each short step, she felt more engaged. In all these study environments, exams, group discussions, classroom answers, the same truth emerges. Nervousness often comes from imagined expectations of perfection. But when learners allow themselves short, clear sentences, polite questions, and gradual contributions, the classroom becomes less of a battlefield and more of a practice ground. And now, as we move forward, we'll step into another theme where English learning deeply affects the heart: family and personal life. Speaking English with family members, neighbors, or close friends can sometimes feel surprisingly hard because emotions are stronger in personal settings. But these situations also bring some of the most rewarding breakthroughs. Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia. And now we'll step into one of the most personal spaces of language learning: family life. Speaking English at home, with loved ones, or in personal situations often feels different from speaking in class or at work. The closeness of relationships sometimes increases nervousness because we fear sounding strange in front of people we respect or love. But these situations also offer some of the safest ground for daily practice. Let's begin with my cousin Emma. She once worried that simple sentences at home weren't enough. During conversations with relatives, she paused often, trying to find more advanced vocabulary. I reminded her that expressing ideas clearly matters more than sentence length. Short sentences can be powerful, and her family appreciated her effort no matter the complexity. Another example comes from my friend Michael. He often felt tense speaking English with his manager at work, but the same nervousness also appeared at home during family gatherings. He imagined judgment even from close relatives. I suggested he picture the conversation as casual, almost like chatting with a friend. That shift helped him relax, and soon he found that sharing ideas naturally mattered far more than avoiding mistakes. Daily family life offers countless opportunities to practice. My friend Alex began a habit of speaking English with his wife while cooking. Together, they described what they were doing step by step. "I am chopping onions. Can you pass me the salt?" This practice was casual, low pressure, and surprisingly effective. The kitchen became a space for playful learning, and soon Alex carried that comfort into other conversations. Chloe, my school friend, had a similar experience with friends on a hiking trip. She worried about explaining her experience in English. Instead of waiting for perfect grammar, she spoke simply. We started early. The trail was long but beautiful. Her friends responded warmly, and Chloe realized that sharing clearly is what connects people, not flawless language. Even children can be part of the journey. My brother Michael once practiced English by playing games with his younger sister Emma. They described objects in the room. The lamp is yellow. The chair is blue. It was fun, lighthearted, and reduced stress. This simple game showed that learning doesn't always need formal lessons. Family routines can turn into practice sessions. Sometimes family-related tasks bring unique challenges. My cousin Emma once had to explain her health symptoms at a pharmacy. She felt nervous because she didn't know advanced medical vocabulary. But she started with simple sentences. "I have a headache. I also feel tired." The pharmacist understood and asked questions. Emma replied, "It started 2 days ago. I take medicine sometimes." She got the help she needed and afterward realized that clarity, not complexity, carried her through. Another story comes from Laura, my neighbor, who attended a parent-teacher meeting at her child's school. Formal settings like this made her anxious. She feared that teachers would judge every mistake. Before the meeting, she practiced short introductions and sentences about her child's homework. When the teacher asked a question, Laura froze at first, but then responded, "My child does homework after school. We review it together." The teacher smiled warmly and Laura's confidence grew. Each successful exchange made the meeting easier. Family and personal life also include social gatherings. My friend Daniel once attended a dinner at his neighbor's house where everyone spoke English. He worried his sentences were too simple, but he started with small comments. "The salad is very fresh." "I like the soup." The guests responded kindly, and soon he shared stories about his workday and hobbies. Step by step, Daniel realized he could participate fully, even without complicated words. Phone conversations in family life also bring special challenges, since body language can't help. My brother Michael once needed to schedule a bank appointment over the phone. Nervous about speed and clarity, he wrote down key points. "I want to schedule an appointment for a new account." "What documents are needed?" When the officer spoke quickly, Michael asked politely, "Could you repeat that?" The call went smoothly, and he realized that preparation and polite clarification were enough. Even small, everyday tasks can build confidence. Sophie, a family friend, once needed to ask a delivery person about a package. She worried she might not explain clearly, but she simply asked, "Hello, I'm expecting a package. Is it here?" Then she added, "Thank you. Can I sign here?" The conversation was quick and successful. Sophie felt proud of managing it despite her initial anxiety. And let's not forget Nathan, who volunteered at a local community center, guiding children in arts and crafts. At first, he was nervous about giving instructions in English, but with preparation and patience, he managed. "Please take a piece of paper." "Can you color this shape?" Simple sentences worked perfectly, and the children understood. Nathan's family noticed his growing confidence at home too. They encouraged him, and his nervousness slowly faded. In family and personal life, nervousness often comes from overthinking, worrying about judgment from loved ones, or expecting advanced vocabulary in casual conversations. But as these stories show, warmth, simplicity, and patience carry us through. Whether it's cooking with a partner, helping a sibling, attending a meeting, or talking to a neighbor, every small interaction builds real-world fluency. And now, having explored how English flows in family life, let's step into another powerful space: emotions and mindset. Here, we'll discover how thoughts, feelings, and confidence directly shape the way learners speak. Welcome back to English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and in this part of our journey, we'll focus on something deeply connected to speaking English: emotions and mindset. Language learning is not only about words and grammar. It is also about how we feel when we speak, how we manage fear, and how we build confidence step by step. Many learners feel nervous because they compare themselves to fluent speakers. My friend Daniel experienced this often. In class, when others spoke faster, he froze. I reminded him that the goal is not to match another person's speed, but to speak clearly at his own pace. With time, he realized that gradual improvement matters more than competing with others. Fear of judgment also plays a huge role. My friend Michael hesitated to speak in meetings because he imagined his colleagues focusing on every mistake. I suggested shifting his mindset. Think less about judgment and more about contribution. Sharing ideas, even imperfectly, matters most. This small change helped Michael reduce pressure and participate more fully. Sometimes nervousness comes from imagining the worst possible scenario. My cousin Olivia once froze in a group discussion because she kept thinking about all the mistakes she might make. I reminded her that most listeners are not counting errors. They are simply listening for ideas. Realizing this gave her courage to keep speaking. Another emotional challenge is anticipating silence. My school friend Chloe once believed that pauses meant failure. After speaking, she worried that silence showed she had nothing to say. I explained that pauses are natural and give time to think. Embracing silence as part of the rhythm helped her speak with more ease. Confidence can also drop when learners overthink grammar or vocabulary. My neighbor James often paused, trying to recall the perfect word or rule. I encouraged him to focus on communicating the main idea first. Grammar can be refined later. Once James shifted his focus, he noticed that people understood him even when his sentences weren't perfect. Nervousness sometimes grows when learners expect perfection from the very first word. My friend Adam joined a study group at his office and stayed silent during the first few sessions. He thought mistakes would make him look unprepared. Later, he discovered that contributing just a few sentences was enough to share his ideas and build confidence. Another example comes from my cousin Lily. She once tried to explain her weekend plans but kept imagining every possible question others might ask. The pressure became too much, and she froze. I suggested focusing on one step at a time. First, tell the story, then answer follow-up questions naturally. With this approach, she spoke more smoothly without overwhelming herself. Mindset also shapes how learners respond to unknown expressions. My friend Megan once heard an idiom in class she didn't understand and stopped speaking, worried she couldn't keep up. I encouraged her to simply ask, "Can you explain what that means?" This small act kept the conversation going and gave her confidence that she could navigate surprises. Another powerful shift comes from thinking in English instead of translating. My neighbor Ryan always translated from his native language before speaking. This slowed him down and made him nervous. I suggested practicing small thoughts directly in English, like describing the weather or meals. Soon, Ryan noticed he could respond faster and felt less anxious. Sometimes learners become discouraged because they expect long, complex conversations immediately. My neighbor Thomas thought he had to speak for minutes without stopping. I reminded him that starting with short sentences is perfectly fine. Step by step, he could expand naturally. This realization lifted the pressure. Mindset also affects how learners handle mistakes. My cousin Emma once worried constantly about repeating errors. I suggested continuing to speak and correcting later. Communication, not perfection, should be the focus. Over time, she found that mistakes became stepping stones rather than barriers. Confidence grows not only through practice, but also through kindness toward oneself. Nathan, the volunteer at the community center, discovered this after weeks of working with children. At first, every mistake made him tense, but soon, he learned to laugh at small errors and keep going. His humor lightened the mood and made conversations enjoyable for everyone. And then there is the power of positive assumptions. My cousin Olivia used to imagine that listeners noticed every mistake. But when she shifted to believing that people were interested in her ideas, her nervousness dropped. She realized most listeners focus on meaning, not error. Emotions and mindset are like the foundation of a house. If the foundation is shaky with fear, self-criticism, and constant comparison, speaking feels stressful. But when the foundation is strong with self-kindness, patience, and courage, speaking becomes more natural and enjoyable. So as you reflect on your own English practice, ask yourself, am I expecting perfection, or am I focusing on connection? Am I comparing myself to others, or am I celebrating my progress? Each small shift in mindset turns nervousness into confidence. Now that we've explored emotions and mindset, let's move into another essential theme: pronunciation and expression. Here we'll see how learners balance clarity with confidence, and why natural expression matters more than flawless sound. Welcome back, my friends. I'm Julia, and in this part of English Without Limit, we'll focus on pronunciation and natural expression. Many learners believe that their accent or pronunciation must be perfect from the very beginning. But these stories will show us that clarity and confidence matter far more than perfection. Let's start with my school friend Chloe. She worried constantly about pronouncing every single word correctly. Because of this, she often hesitated and lost confidence mid-sentence. I encouraged her to focus on ideas first, speaking naturally and letting her pronunciation improve gradually with practice. Over time, Chloe realized that the more she spoke, the more her pronunciation improved without stress. My neighbor Thomas also struggled with pronunciation anxiety. He paused frequently because he felt he wasn't saying words the right way. I reminded him that listeners usually understand the meaning even if the sound isn't perfect. What matters most is clear communication. That advice gave him the courage to keep speaking without second-guessing himself. Another challenge learners face is worrying about fillers. Those little words like, or short phrases such as, let me think. My neighbor Thomas once paused awkwardly in conversations because he didn't know what to say. I suggested he try simple fillers like, let me think, or that's interesting. These expressions helped him keep the conversation flowing naturally, without feeling pressured to respond immediately. My friend Nathan also used to overthink how his pronunciation sounded. One summer, while volunteering at a community center, he worried that children might not understand him. But as he gave simple instructions with patience and repeated when necessary, he realized that being clear and kind mattered more than sounding perfect. In fact, the children understood him well, and their smiles reassured him. Sometimes learners fear their accent will hold them back. My friend Mark joined a local English conversation group. On the first day, he introduced himself but spoke very slowly, worried that his strong accent would make him difficult to understand. The group leader encouraged him to share his story piece by piece. Mark discovered that people valued his ideas and didn't mind his accent at all. This taught him that accent is part of identity. It doesn't prevent meaningful conversation. Another story comes from my cousin Emma, who once tried to memorize complicated vocabulary to sound impressive. She hesitated in conversations, searching for perfect words, and her speech sounded unnatural. I suggested focusing on expressing ideas clearly, even with simple words. Listeners understood her better, and over time her vocabulary grew naturally. Pauses also play a role in pronunciation and flow. My neighbor James used to panic whenever he paused, thinking it showed weakness. I explained that short silences are a normal part of speaking, giving space to organize thoughts. After embracing pauses, James felt less pressure and spoke more smoothly. Even in professional settings, pronunciation can cause stress. My cousin Ryan had to present a short report in English at his office. He feared that every small mispronunciation would be noticed. Instead of chasing perfection, he focused on clarity, pausing when needed, and keeping his sentences simple. His colleagues appreciated his clear delivery, and Ryan realized that confidence matters more than flawless sound. Sometimes learners worry about sounding boring because they keep their sentences simple. My school friend Chloe thought short sentences weren't enough to engage listeners. I reassured her that natural expression matters more than complexity. Sharing everyday experiences, even in simple words, builds authentic connection. Another example comes from my friend Michael. He once panicked in class when asked long questions, thinking he had to respond with long, perfect sentences. I encouraged him to break his response into smaller parts. This approach gave him space to pronounce clearly, focus on one idea at a time, and feel more confident. We can also look at the role of cultural expression. My friend Michael once hesitated in a discussion because he wasn't sure how to respond politely in English. I reminded him that small cues and polite phrases like, "May I add something?" help learners join conversations with confidence. These expressions not only clarify intention, but also make speech flow naturally. My neighbor Laura experienced something similar at her local book club. She thought she needed long, complex contributions. But she soon discovered that simple comments like, "I liked the main character," or "the ending surprised me," were enough to keep the discussion engaging. Her natural, clear sentences built confidence and helped her participate without stress. Pronunciation, fillers, pauses, and accents, all of these are part of natural communication. When learners stop chasing perfection and instead focus on being clear, polite, and confident, they discover that communication becomes much easier. So remember this: your accent is a part of your identity. Fillers are natural. Pauses are human. What matters is that you express your thoughts step by step. With practice, pronunciation improves and expression becomes more natural. Now that we've explored pronunciation and expression, let's move toward our final reflections. In the next and last part, I'll bring everything together: daily life, work, study, family, emotions, and expression into one warm conclusion to close our journey. My dear friends, we have traveled together through many stories, reflections, and real-life examples. We began by exploring the nervousness that so many learners feel when speaking English. We looked at situations in daily life, from ordering food at a cafe to asking about a package delivery, from shopping in a busy market to making small talk at a neighbor's dinner. We saw how simple, polite sentences can build confidence in everyday situations. We then moved through family and social life, parents attending school meetings, cousins joining conversations at gatherings, friends practicing English together while cooking or hiking. These moments reminded us that English is not about perfection, but about connection. A short, clear phrase spoken with warmth often carries more meaning than a long, complicated sentence. From there, we reflected on study and work. Learners faced nervousness in classrooms, during exams, at office meetings, and in professional presentations. We saw how focusing on ideas first and grammar later, breaking long answers into smaller parts, and preparing simple sentences allowed them to succeed. Confidence came not from flawless vocabulary, but from clarity, patience, and steady practice. We also shared stories about health and formal situations. Emma at the pharmacy, Laura at the parent-teacher meeting, Mark at the English conversation group, Nathan volunteering at a community center. Each story showed us that nervousness fades when communication becomes the goal, rather than perfection. Pronunciation and expression played their part as well. Many learners feared their accent, their fillers, or their pauses. Yet time and again, we learned that accents are part of identity. Fillers are natural, and pauses are human. What listeners value most is effort, clarity, and kindness in communication. When we bring all of these experiences together, one truth becomes clear. English learning is not about chasing flawless grammar, memorizing perfect phrases, or comparing yourself with others. It is about expressing your ideas step by step, building habits of practice, and allowing yourself to grow naturally. Think of Thomas ordering his first coffee. Think of Sophie speaking kindly to a delivery person. Think of Nathan guiding children with simple instructions. Think of Laura sharing her thoughts in a book club. These moments remind us that every sentence, no matter how small, is a step toward confidence. So as we close this long journey together, I invite you to remember: speak with courage, practice with patience, and allow yourself to learn without limits. Mistakes are part of growth. Nervousness is a sign that you care. And every single time you speak, you become more fluent, more confident, and more connected. This is English Without Limit, and I am Julia. Thank you for spending this time with me, for walking through these stories, and for opening your heart to practice and reflection. Keep speaking, keep learning, and keep believing in your voice. Until next time, take care and remember, your English has no limits.